October 19, 1944. The Hungarian countryside near Debrecen. Lieutenant James Morrison's Hellcat fighter screamed toward the earth, trailing black smoke across an iron-gray sky. The 24-year-old Navy pilot from Iowa had exactly 7 seconds to make peace with his mortality. His engine had taken flak during a strafing run on a German supply column, and now gravity was winning. He yanked the canopy release. The wind tore at his flight suit as he tumbled into the cold autumn air. His parachute deployed with a violent jerk that knocked the breath from his lungs. Below him, a patchwork of brown fields and dark forests rushed upward. Morrison knew the statistics. Allied airmen shot down over Hungary had a survival rate of less than 30%. The Arrow Cross Party, Hungary's homegrown fascists, had turned hunting down flyers into a blood sport. They didn't take prisoners. They took trophies. As his boots hit the frozen mud of a harvested wheat field, Morrison's first thought wasn't survival. It was how quickly they would find him. His second thought was whether they would make it quick. He was wrong on both counts. What happened next would shatter everything he thought he knew about this war, about his mission, and about the invisible threads connecting a farm boy from Des Moines to a Jewish family hiding beneath the earth of a country he'd only seen from 20,000 feet. This is the story of 9 weeks that changed one man's understanding of what it meant to fight, to survive, and to be saved by the very people his bombs were supposed to protect. Morrison hit the ground hard, rolling through the stubble of cut wheat that scraped his face and hands. His training kicked in immediately. Collapse the chute, check for injuries, orient yourself, get moving. The parachute silk billowed in the wind, a white beacon visible for miles. He fought with the harness, fingers clumsy with adrenaline, finally freeing himself from the straps. His right ankle screamed with pain, probably sprained in the landing. No time to assess. He could hear dogs in the distance, or maybe it was his imagination. Maybe it was just the wind carrying the sounds of a war that had turned this entire continent into a graveyard. He limped toward a tree line about 200 yards away, dragging his injured leg, leaving a trail in the soft earth that a child could follow. Behind him, his parachute danced in the wind like a ghost. He'd made it perhaps 50 yards when he heard the voices. Hungarian, sharp, commanding. Morrison dropped into a shallow drainage ditch, pressing his face into the mud, trying to become invisible. Through the dead grass he could see them. 3 men in the distinctive green uniforms of the Hungarian gendarmerie, rifles slung over their shoulders, moving with the casual confidence of hunters who knew their prey had nowhere to run. They'd spotted the parachute. One of them pointed toward Morrison's position. They'd seen his trail. The pilot's hand moved to the Colt 1911 pistol on his hip. 7 rounds, 3 men. He'd never fired his sidearm in combat. He'd dropped bombs from altitude, strafed convoys from 500 feet, but he'd never looked another man in the eyes and pulled a trigger. His hand trembled on the grip. The gendarmes were 100 yards away now. 75. Morrison could see their faces. One of them was laughing at something another had said. They were in no hurry. Then from behind him a voice, barely a whisper in English, "Get up, follow me." Now, Morrison spun his head. A man stood at the edge of the tree line, maybe 40 years old, thin as a rail, wearing a farmer's rough wool coat. His face was gaunt, eyes sunken, but his expression was urgent. The man gestured frantically. Morrison looked back at the gendarmes. 50 yards. He made his choice. Ignoring the fire in his ankle, he scrambled out of the ditch and ran, or rather hobbled desperately toward the stranger. The man turned and moved into the trees with surprising speed. Morrison crashed through the underbrush behind him, branches whipping his face, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind them, a shout. They'd been seen. The crack of a rifle shot split the air. Morrison didn't look back. The stranger led him on a twisting path through the forest, moving with the confidence of someone who knew every tree, every hidden trail. Morrison's ankle was on fire, his lungs burning, but terror was a powerful anesthetic. After what felt like hours but was probably 5 minutes, they burst from the tree line into a small clearing. A farmhouse stood in the center, weathered wood and a sagging roof. It looked abandoned. The man grabbed Morrison's arm and pulled him toward a barn behind the house. Inside, the smell of old hay and animal dung. The stranger moved to the back corner, kicked aside some loose boards, and revealed a wooden hatch set into the earth. He pulled it open. "Down," he said, quickly. Morrison hesitated for only a second. Behind them, the dogs were real now. He could hear them baying, getting closer. He dropped into the darkness. The stranger followed, pulling the hatch closed above them. Morrison found himself on a rough wooden ladder, descending into blackness. His feet touched earth. The stranger struck a match, and in its flickering light, Morrison saw that they were in a cellar, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet, with a dirt floor and wooden support beams. The ceiling was so low Morrison had to hunch. The match went out. In the darkness, the stranger's voice came again, still barely above a whisper. "Stay silent. They will search. If they find us, we all die." Morrison's eyes adjusted slowly. A thin line of light filtered through cracks in the floorboards above, creating faint stripes in the gloom. As his vision cleared, he realized they weren't alone. 3 other people huddled in the corner of the cellar. 2 women and a young girl, maybe 12 years old. They stared at him with expressions that mixed fear and something else. Resignation, maybe, or perhaps just exhaustion. Above them, the sound of boots on wooden floors. Voices, harsh, demanding. The gendarmes had reached the farmhouse. Morrison held his breath. The man who had saved him put a finger to his lips, though the gesture was barely visible in the darkness. The family, if that's what they were, didn't move. They barely seemed to breathe. For 10 minutes, the sounds of a thorough search filtered down through the floorboards. Furniture being overturned, doors slamming. The gendarmes were directly above them now. Morrison could hear every word, though he didn't understand the language. One of them was standing exactly over the hatch. Morrison could see the shadow of his boots through the cracks in the boards. The young girl's hand found her mother's. The woman's face was a mask of controlled terror. This was not their first time hiding from men with guns. The gendarme above them shifted his weight, moved away. More conversation. Then, finally, the sounds of boots leaving. The front door slamming, voices fading into the distance. Still, no one in the cellar moved. They waited in silence for another 20 minutes, maybe 30. Time became elastic in the darkness. Finally, the man who had saved Morrison spoke. "My name is David Kovacs. This is my wife, Sarah. My mother, Ruth. My daughter, Anna. You are in our home, or rather beneath it." Morrison found his voice. "Lieutenant James Morrison, United States Navy. I don't understand. Why did you help me? Why are you hiding down here?" David Kovacs lit a small oil lamp, keeping the flame low. In its weak light, Morrison could see the cellar more clearly now. Blankets in the corner, a bucket, some tins of food. A few books. This was not a temporary hiding place. People had been living here. David met Morrison's eyes. "We are Jews, Lieutenant. We have been hiding in this cellar for 4 months. The Arrow Cross took our neighbors 3 weeks ago. They are looking for us. They have been looking for us, and now they are looking for you. We heard your plane crash. We saw your parachute. We knew they would come." Morrison's mind reeled. You risked exposing yourselves for me. You don't even know me. Sarah Kovacs spoke for the first time. Her English was accented but clear. We know enough. You are American. You are fighting them. That is enough. The young girl, Anna, stared at Morrison with undisguised curiosity. She whispered something to her grandmother in Hungarian. Ruth smiled sadly and whispered back. David translated. She wants to know if you have children, if your wife knows you are alive. Morrison shook his head. No wife, no children. Just a mother back in Iowa who thinks I'm flying missions over Yugoslavia. David nodded slowly. Then we will keep you alive to return to her, if we can, if God wills it. That first night in the cellar was the longest of Morrison's life. The space was claustrophobic, the air thick and stale. The family moved with practiced efficiency, speaking in whispers when they spoke at all. They shared their meager rations with him, bread that was more sawdust than flour, some kind of preserved vegetables, water from a jug that David refilled from a well after dark. Morrison learned their story in fragments, whispered in the darkness between the sounds of patrols passing above. The Kovacs family had owned a small dry goods store in Debrecen before the war. They'd been prosperous, respected. David's father had fought for Hungary in the First World War, had a medal for bravery. It hadn't mattered. When the Germans occupied Hungary in March of 1944, everything changed overnight. The yellow stars came first, then the ghettos, then the deportations. David's father had refused to believe it would come to their town. He'd been wrong. In May, the gendarmes had come. They'd taken David's father in the first roundup. He'd been put on a train to Auschwitz. They'd learned later through whispers and rumors that he died within a week of arrival, gassed, burned, erased. David had seen what was coming. He'd prepared this cellar in secret, bringing down supplies, reinforcing the walls. When the gendarmes came for the second roundup in June, the Kovacs family had vanished. Their neighbors thought they'd been taken. In truth, they descended into the earth beneath their own home and pulled the darkness over themselves like a blanket. For 4 months they'd lived like ghosts. David ventured out only at night, foraging for food, gathering news. The rest of the time they huddled in the cellar, listening to the world above them, waiting for the war to end or for discovery, whichever came first. Morrison listened to all of this in stunned silence. He'd known, abstractly, about the persecution of Jews. There had been briefings, intelligence reports, but hearing it from people who'd lived it, who were living it still, was different. It was real in a way that briefings could never be. On the second day, David asked Morrison about his mission. "What were you bombing, Lieutenant? What brings an American pilot to Hungary?" Morrison explained. He was flying off the USS Intrepid, part of a carrier group supporting the advance into Eastern Europe. His squadron's mission had been to disrupt German supply lines, railways, bridges, convoys. Anything that kept the Wehrmacht supplied and mobile. "We've been hitting rail yards hard," Morrison said, "trying to cut off their logistics. There's a major junction near here. We've bombed it 3 times in the last month." David's face changed. Something flickered in his eyes. "The rail junction. You have bombed the rail junction." Morrison nodded. "Tore it up pretty good last week. Set them back at least a few days of repairs." David was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that hit Morrison like a physical blow. "Those trains you delayed, some of them were deportation trains, heading to Poland, to the camps." Morrison felt the blood drain from his face. "What?" Sarah spoke up, her voice soft but firm. "We heard from others in hiding. The Germans have been using the rail lines to transport Jews from Hungary to Auschwitz. Thousands, tens of thousands. When you bomb the railways, the trains stop. They have to wait for repairs. Some people maybe get a few more days of life, maybe some escape, maybe some survive because of a delay. Morrison's hands began to shake. I didn't know. We were targeting military logistics. We didn't know about the deportation trains. David's expression was unreadable. War is complicated, Lieutenant. You bomb railways to stop German soldiers, but the same railways carry Jews to death camps. You delay one, you delay the other. Who can say what is the greater good? The question hung in the stale air of the cellar. Morrison had no answer. He dropped his bombs from 20,000 feet, watching the explosions bloom like flowers, feeling the satisfaction of a mission accomplished. He'd never thought about what else might be on those tracks, what lives might be saved or lost by his actions. The days blurred together. Morrison's ankle healed slowly. The family shared everything they had with him, even though it meant their own rations grew smaller. Anna, the young girl, gradually warmed to him. She taught him Hungarian words. He taught her American songs, sung in whispers. Yankee Doodle in a cellar beneath a Hungarian farmhouse, while outside, men with guns searched for anyone who didn't belong. David went out every few nights, returning with news. The Arrow Cross were still searching for Morrison. Posters had been put up in town. American pilot, reward for information. They'd searched the farmhouse twice more, but they'd never found the hidden hatch. The Kovacs family's camouflage was perfect. Ruth, the grandmother, spoke little, but Morrison noticed she watched him constantly. One night, in halting English, she told him about her husband, David's father. He believed in Hungary, she said. He believed we were Hungarians first, Jews second. He died believing his country would protect him. He died wrong. Morrison didn't know what to say. He thought about his own father, dead from a heart attack when Morrison was 16. He'd believed in America with the same fierce certainty. Would America have protected him if he'd been born something other than what he was? Morrison wanted to believe yes. But sitting in that cellar, listening to Ruth's quiet grief, he wasn't sure of anything anymore. Week 3 brought a crisis. David returned from a foraging trip with disturbing news. The Arrow Cross were conducting house-to-house searches in the area, methodical, thorough. They were checking every building, every cellar, every hiding place. They would reach the Kovacs farm within days. "We have to move you," David said. "There is another family 2 kilometers away. They have a better hiding place, a false wall in their barn. You will be safer there." Morrison shook his head. "I won't put anyone else at risk. I'll take my chances on my own, try to make it to the Soviet lines." Sarah laughed, a sound without humor. "The Soviet lines are 60 kilometers away. You speak no Hungarian. You are injured. You would be caught within a day." David leaned forward. "Listen to me, Lieutenant. We are Jews hiding from fascists. You are an American hiding from fascists. In this, we are the same. We save each other or we die alone. Which do you prefer?" Morrison had no argument for that. The plan was set. They would move at night. David would guide Morrison to the other farm. The rest of the family would stay behind, maintaining the illusion of normalcy. But the night before the planned move, everything changed. Anna fell ill. It started with a fever. By midnight, she was delirious, burning up. Sarah held her daughter, whispering prayers in Hebrew. David paced the small cellar like a caged animal. "She needs a doctor," Sarah said. "David, she needs medicine." "We cannot get a doctor," David replied, his voice tight with anguish. "If we bring a doctor here, they will find us. All of us." Morrison watched the family's agony and made a decision. "I'll go. Tell me where to find a doctor. I'll bring him back." David stared at him. "You cannot. You do not speak Hungarian. You will be caught. Morrison pulled out his dog tags, tucked them inside his shirt. I'll take the risk. Tell me where to go. For a long moment David said nothing. Then he nodded. There is a doctor in the village, Dr. Nemeth. He is sympathetic. He has helped others, but you must be careful. The Arrow Cross patrol at night. David gave Morrison directions, drew a map in the dirt floor. Morrison memorized it, then climbed the ladder. David opened the hatch. The night air was cold and clean after weeks in the cellar. Morrison breathed it in, feeling almost dizzy with the space, the openness. David gripped his arm. If you are caught, you do not know us. You never saw us. Morrison met his eyes. If I'm caught, I'll already be dead. He moved through the darkness, following David's directions. His ankle held mostly. The village was 2 kilometers away, a collection of dark houses huddled together like frightened animals. Morrison moved from shadow to shadow, every sense screaming alert. He found the doctor's house, a small cottage on the edge of the village. He knocked softly on the door. No answer. He knocked again, more urgently. A light appeared in a window. The door opened a crack. An old man peered out, suspicious. Morrison spoke the Hungarian phrase David had taught him. A friend sent me. A child is sick. The doctor's eyes narrowed. What friend? Morrison hesitated. Then he said in English, a Jewish family. They are hiding. Their daughter has a fever, please. For a long moment the doctor said nothing. Then he opened the door wider. Wait here. He returned 5 minutes later with a medical bag. We go quickly. We are not seen. They made it back to the farm without incident. The doctor descended into the cellar, examined Anna, and gave her an injection of something from a small vial. Infection, he said in broken English. This will help. She needs rest, clean water, prayer. He looked at Morrison. You are the American pilot. Morrison nodded. The doctor smiled grimly. You are very foolish, very brave, mostly foolish. He left medicine, instructions, and a warning. The Arrow Cross search will reach here in 2 days. You must all leave or hide better. After he'd gone, Sarah held her daughter and wept. David gripped Morrison's hand. You risked your life for my child. For a Jew you do not know. Why? Morrison thought about the question. He thought about the bombs he'd dropped, the trains he'd delayed, the invisible connections between his actions and the lives of people he'd never met. I don't know, he said finally, because it was right. Because you saved me first. Because we're all just trying to survive this nightmare. David nodded slowly. Yes, we are all just trying to survive. Anna's fever broke the next morning. By evening she was sitting up, weak but smiling. She whispered something to Morrison in Hungarian. David translated. She says you are her American angel. She says God sent you to save her. Morrison felt his throat tighten. Tell her I'm no angel. Tell her she saved me first. The Arrow Cross search came as predicted. Morrison and the Kovacs family huddled in the cellar, barely breathing as boots tramped overhead. This time, the searchers were more thorough. They tapped on walls, listening for hollow spaces. They pulled up floorboards in places. Morrison could hear them directly above the hatch. One of the searchers was standing on it. The wood creaked under his weight. Anna buried her face in her mother's shoulder. Ruth's lips moved in silent prayer. Morrison's hand moved to his pistol. If they were discovered, he would not let them take the family alive. Better a quick death than the trains. But the searcher moved on. The hatch held. The camouflage held. After 2 hours, the Arrow Cross left. In the silence that followed, no one spoke. There were no words for the kind of terror that had become routine, the kind of luck that was indistinguishable from miracle. Week 5. Week 6. Morrison's beard grew long. He lost weight on the meager rations. The family grew thinner too. David's nighttime foraging trips became more dangerous as the Arrow Cross tightened their grip on the region. But they survived. They told each other stories to pass the time. Morrison talked about Iowa, about cornfields that stretched to the horizon, about county fairs and baseball games and a life that seemed impossibly distant now. The Kovacs family talked about their life before, the store they'd owned, Anna's school, holidays, normalcy. They spoke of these things like they were fairy tales, beautiful and unreal. Morrison learned Hebrew prayers from Ruth. He taught Anna to count in English. He and David played chess on a board David had carved from scraps of wood, using pebbles for pieces. They played hundreds of games in the darkness, moving pieces they could barely see, locked in silent battles that meant nothing and everything. One night David asked Morrison a question. "When this war ends, Lieutenant, what will you do?" Morrison thought about it. "Go home, I guess. Maybe go to college on the GI Bill, get married, have kids, live a normal life." "If I remember how," David nodded. "And will you tell them, your children, about this, about us?" Morrison met his eyes, every word. "I'll tell them everything. I'll tell them about the family that saved my life. About the courage I saw in a cellar in Hungary. About the people who risked everything for a stranger." David smiled. "Good. Someone should remember. Someone should know we were here, that we lived, that we fought in our own way." Week 7 brought unexpected news. David returned from a foraging trip with information from the underground network of hidden Jews and sympathizers. The Soviets were advancing faster than expected. They would reach the region within weeks, maybe days. Liberation was coming. But so was a final, desperate push by the Arrow Cross. They were conducting mass executions of remaining Jews, trying to finish what they'd started before the Red Army arrived. Every day was a race between salvation and annihilation. The Kovacs family debated whether to stay hidden or try to flee toward the Soviet lines. Morrison argued for staying put. "The Soviets are coming. You've survived this long. Don't risk it now." But David was less certain. "The Arrow Cross know they are running out of time. They will be more thorough, more brutal. If they find us now, they will not just arrest us. They will kill us on the spot." Sarah held her daughter close. "We stay. We have survived 4 months. We can survive a few more weeks. God has protected us this far." Ruth spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. "God has protected us. And the American, both. We stay together." Morrison felt a fierce surge of protectiveness for this family. They'd saved him. They'd shared their last crumbs of food with him. They'd risked everything repeatedly for a stranger who dropped from the sky. If the Arrow Cross came, he would fight. 7 bullets in his pistol. He'd make them count. Week 8. The sounds of war grew closer. Artillery rumbled in the distance. At night, the eastern horizon flickered with the flash of explosions. The front was coming. David's foraging trips became impossible. The Arrow Cross had imposed a strict curfew. Anyone found outside after dark was shot on sight. The family's food ran out. They rationed the last of their water. Anna stopped complaining about hunger. That was the worst part, Morrison thought. When the child stopped complaining, stopped asking, when she just accepted starvation as normal. Morrison gave his rations to Anna. David noticed and tried to refuse. "She needs it more than I do," Morrison said. David looked at him for a long moment. "You have become one of us, Lieutenant. You have become family." Morrison realized it was true. In 9 weeks underground, these people had become closer to him than his own squadron mates. They'd shared everything: fear, hope, stories, survival. They were bound together by something deeper than blood. On the 60th day, December 18, 1944, the world above them exploded. Artillery fire. Close. The cellar shook. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Morrison could hear the distinct sound of Soviet Katyusha rocket launchers, the weapons the Germans called Stalin's organs. The Red Army had arrived. For 3 days, the battle raged above them. The farmhouse took several hits. Part of the roof collapsed. The Kovacs family and Morrison huddled in the cellar, covering their heads as the earth shook and the air filled with the smell of cordite and burning wood. On the 3rd day, silence. Eerie. Complete. David looked at Morrison. "We should wait, make sure." Morrison nodded. They waited another day. Finally, Morrison climbed the ladder and carefully pushed open the hatch. The farmhouse was a ruin. One wall had collapsed entirely. The roof was gone, but the cellar had held. Morrison emerged into weak winter sunlight. The landscape had been transformed. Shell craters pocked the fields. The barn was gone, just a pile of charred timber. In the distance, he could see Soviet tanks, distinctive T-34s, moving along the road. He went back down. "It's over. The Soviets are here. We're liberated." The Kovacs family climbed out of the cellar into the light. Anna blinked in the sunshine, raising a hand to shield her eyes. Sarah began to cry, great heaving sobs of relief and grief and exhaustion. Ruth sank to her knees in the rubble and prayed. David stood beside Morrison, looking at the destruction of his home. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "We are alive. That is enough." Morrison and the Kovacs family made their way to the Soviet lines. The Red Army soldiers were suspicious at first, but Morrison's uniform and dog tags identified him as an Allied airman. The Soviets had a protocol for this. He would be sent to a collection point, then eventually repatriated through Allied channels. The Kovacs family would be processed as displaced persons. Morrison tried to stay with them, but the Soviet officer in charge was firm. "You go with military personnel. They go to civilian processing. You will be separated." Morrison looked at David. "After everything we've been through, this is how it ends. We just get separated." David gripped his hand. "You are alive. We are alive. That is not an ending, Lieutenant. That is a beginning." They embraced. Sarah kissed Morrison's cheek. Ruth blessed him in Hebrew. Anna gave him a small wooden chess piece, one of the pawns David had carved. "So you remember," she said in careful English. "So you remember we were real." Morrison clutched the wooden pawn. "I'll never forget." "I promise." He was taken away in a Soviet truck. He looked back until the Kovacs family disappeared from view. Morrison was repatriated in February of 1945. He spent 3 weeks in debriefing, telling and retelling his story. The intelligence officers were fascinated by his account of conditions in Hungary, of the Arrow Cross operations, of the underground network helping hidden Jews. They were less interested in the personal details, the family that saved him, the cellar where he'd lived for 9 weeks, the chess games and whispered conversations and shared hunger. Those details didn't make it into the official reports. Morrison returned to the United States in March. He was awarded the Purple Heart for injuries sustained in action and the Distinguished Flying Cross for his missions over Hungary. There was a ceremony, medals pinned to his chest. Photographs, a parade in Des Moines. He smiled for the cameras and shook hands with the mayor and felt like a fraud. The real heroes were in a cellar in Hungary. The real courage belonged to people whose names would never appear in any citation. Morrison tried to find the Kovacs family after the war. He wrote letters to displaced persons organizations, to Jewish relief agencies, to anyone who might have records. For 3 years, he heard nothing. Then, in 1948, he received a letter. It was from David. The family had survived. They'd spent 2 years in displaced persons camps before immigrating to Palestine, arriving just in time for the establishment of Israel. David wrote about their new life, the struggles, the hope, the determination to build something from the ashes. Sarah was teaching school. Ruth had died peacefully in her sleep, finally able to rest. Anna was 15 now, learning to be a Sabra, an Israeli native. She still had the chess piece Morrison had given her. David's letter ended with a question. "Will you come visit us, Lieutenant? Will you come see what we have built?" Morrison went in 1949. He spent 2 weeks with the Kovacs family in their small apartment in Tel Aviv. They talked for hours, remembering the cellar, the fear, the strange intimacy of survival. Anna, now a young woman, showed him her school. She was studying to be a teacher. She wanted to make sure the next generation knew what had happened, knew what people had endured, knew what people had done to save each other. On Morrison's last night in Israel, he and David sat on a rooftop looking at the stars. "You know," David said, "I have thought often about what you said, about the trains you bombed, about delaying the deportations." Morrison had thought about it too, every day for 5 years. "I don't know if it made a difference. I don't know if anyone was saved because of what we did." David was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "There is a Talmudic teaching. Whoever saves one life saves the world entire. You saved Anna when you went for the doctor. We saved you when we pulled you into our cellar. How many worlds did we save? How many futures?" Morrison felt tears on his face. "I was just trying to survive. We all were." David nodded. "Yes. And that is the victory, Lieutenant. Not the medals, not the parades. The victory is that we survived, that we remained human when the world became inhuman, that we saved each other." They sat in silence, two men who had shared darkness and emerged into light, watching the stars over a land that had been promised and fought for and drenched in blood and hope. Morrison returned to the United States and went to college on the GI Bill. He became a teacher like Anna. He married, had 3 children, lived in a small house in Iowa that was nothing like a cellar in Hungary and everything like home. But he never forgot. He told his children about the Kovacs family. He told his students. When Holocaust deniers began to emerge in the decades after the war, Morrison became a speaker, traveling to schools and synagogues, telling his story. Not as a hero, as a witness. He stayed in touch with the Kovacs family for the rest of his life. Letters, occasional visits. When David died in 1982, Morrison flew to Israel for the funeral. He stood with Sarah and Anna's children, and he remembered a cellar where they'd all been equals in fear and hope. Morrison died in 1997, at the age of 77. At his funeral, his daughter read a letter that had arrived the week before from Anna Kovacs. Anna was a grandmother now, living in Jerusalem, teaching history to Israeli students. Her letter talked about her grandfather David, about her mother Sarah, about her grandmother Ruth. It talked about an American pilot who had fallen from the sky and become family. It talked about the chess piece she still kept, the wooden pawn carved in darkness. And it ended with these words: "Your father taught me that war is not simple, that bombs that destroy can also save, that enemies and friends are sometimes separated by nothing more than circumstance and choice. He taught me that humanity persists even in the darkest places, that strangers can become family, that survival is not enough. We must also remember. We must also tell the story. So I tell my students about the American pilot and the Jewish family in the cellar. I tell them about the 9 weeks that changed all of our lives. I tell them that in the midst of the greatest evil humanity has ever created, there were still moments of grace, still choices to be human, still reasons to hope. Your father was one of those reasons. He was one of those moments of grace. And I will make sure, as long as I live, that the world knows it. The letter was passed around at the funeral. Morrison's children and grandchildren read it. His former students read it. And they understood, perhaps for the first time, the weight their father had carried. The knowledge that war was never as simple as good and evil, allies and enemies. That every bomb dropped had consequences seen and unseen. That the trains delayed might have carried soldiers or victims or both. That the only certainty was that people, ordinary people, had the capacity for extraordinary courage. Morrison's story is not unique. Thousands of Allied airmen were shot down over Axis territory. Many were hidden by civilians who risked everything to save them. But Morrison's story is unique in one way. He was saved by the very people his missions were supposed to protect. He lived with them, shared their fear, learned their story. He understood, in a way few others could, the terrible complexity of strategic warfare. The unintended consequences, the invisible threads connecting actions and outcomes. He bombed railways to stop the Wehrmacht and inadvertently delayed trains to Auschwitz. He was saved by Jews hiding from deportation. He risked his life for a sick child who had no reason to trust an American stranger. And in doing so, he learned that the real war was not fought at 20,000 feet. It was fought in cellars and attics and hidden spaces where ordinary people made extraordinary choices, where they decided that one more life saved was worth any risk, where they remembered that humanity was not a luxury to be abandoned in crisis, but a necessity to be preserved at all costs. The wooden chess pawn David carved in that cellar is now in the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington. Next to it is a placard telling the story of Lieutenant James Morrison and the Kovacs family. Every year, thousands of visitors stop to read it. They learn about the cellar, the 9 weeks, the convergence of fates that brought together an American pilot and a Jewish family in the darkness beneath a Hungarian farmhouse. They learn that war is complicated, that heroes are not always the ones wearing uniforms, that courage sometimes looks like opening a hatch to let a stranger into your hiding place, knowing it could mean death for everyone. And they learn that in the end, the greatest victory is not defeating an enemy. It is remaining human. It is choosing to save one more life, one more time, even when the world has gone mad. Morrison understood that. The Kovacs family understood that. And because they did, because they made the choices they made in the autumn of 1944, the world is different. Not in grand, sweeping ways, but in small, essential ways. Anna Kovacs lived to teach another generation. Morrison lived to tell the story. Their children and grandchildren exist because 2 groups of desperate people chose to save each other. That is the legacy of 9 weeks in a cellar, not medals or monuments, but life, continuing, persisting, remembering, and in the remembering, honoring the truth that even in the darkest moments of human history, light persists. Humanity persists, hope persists, one cellar at a time, one choice at a time, one life at a time. This is what Morrison learned in the autumn of 1944. This is what he spent the rest of his life teaching. And this is what we must remember, not just the horror of what was done, but the grace of what was chosen, the courage of ordinary people who became extraordinary, the families who opened their hiding places to strangers, the pilots who went for doctors in the night, the children who shared their last crumbs of bread, the grandmothers who blessed their enemies' enemies, the fathers who carved chess pieces in the dark. These are the stories that matter. These are the moments that define us, not as Americans or Jews or Hungarians or any other label, but as human beings, capable of terrible evil, capable of extraordinary good, capable of choosing, even in the darkest cellars, to be the light.